Hello, Warren Dockter here again, and with me is Professor Richard Toye. We're discussing Churchill's best books, and today we're going to be talking about his World War II memoirs.
Well, this, of course, is a sort of a huge work, 6 volumes, and written with the assistance of many people. So there's sort of interesting debate or discussion to be had about the degree to which it really was Churchill's own book.
Yeah, I mean, obviously his literary assistants such as Bill Deacon and Dennis Kelly, obviously played a huge part in this, particularly in understanding how the Second World War unraveled. And I think one of the key things about this book is that he also had access to privileged information that no one else really did. So his version of the story sort of became the story until much later on.
Yeah. And of course, one of the things which he liked to do was to quote his own sort of minutes and memoranda at great length, which in their own right often seemed very compelling. It seemed compelling until you see what the other person responded. And so that he sort of gave himself an advantage in that way. However, of course, some people, when they agreed to allow their material to be used, or allow him to use his side of the correspondence, sort of played it quite cleverly. And one of those was Robert Menzies, who said, well, they'd had this famous dispute sort of in 1940, and Menzies said, well, yes, certainly, by all means, print your side of the correspondence as long as you print mine in full. So there were some, Churchill didn't always get it entirely his own way.
And that's a very interesting point. I mean, Churchill has, of course, a history of creating his version of events, and the best example of that, of course, is the World Crisis, which was itself a huge undertaking.
Yes, because this was his history of the First World War, again described famously by Arthur Balfour as Winston's brilliant autobiography described as a history of the universe. And so again, he has been accused of a great deal of selectivity and of sort of making use of information which other people didn't have. And of course, that was actually part of a process which went on, including beyond World War II, whereby other people then insisted on their own right to consult the official archives in order to put their own point of view to challenge ways in which they thought they had been misrepresented. So although Churchill's viewpoint certainly became very influential, we shouldn't imagine that it was always uncontested.
So exactly, and in fact brought a lot of, I guess, heavy criticism, even starting with, I mean, you can definitely see, in my opinion, the World Crisis as a sort of apology for the Dardanelles. And then you can extrapolate that further into the Second World War, and you can see the way Churchill presents facts on some of his less great ideas.
And I mean, I think on this book, it's worth recommending both Robin Pryor's The World Crisis as history, but also, of course, David Reynolds' more recent book, In Command of History, which looks at the ways in which the Second World War memoirs were constructed in a very detailed way, making excellent use of the series of drafts which survive in the Churchill papers. So in a sense, ideally, at least as a historian, you don't just read the book, you actually look at the drafts and the papers that lie behind it.
And it's very important to underline the use of the archives alongside of books like these that present Churchill's sort of version of the history, but isn't necessarily the true version of the history.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that again, one can see other figures such as Alan Brooke in the 1950s publishing selections of their diaries. Alan Brooke got quite a harsh reaction from public opinion, and I think, but again, there were other views out there at the time.
Yeah, even though they weren't necessarily as popular. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you again next week.